We don't need a reset because the U.S.-Kenya relationship and cooperation continued robustly throughout my presidency.
We are looking to partner with our friends, old and new, to help us achieve the Kenyan dream, to help us achieve our social economic agenda. And the U.S. happens to be a very strong partner of Kenya in that objective, as are many other countries in the world.
Well, welcome back. We're talking about Africa and the increasing role China and the United States are playing in the region. Joining us from Beijing is the Director of the African Studies Unit at the Institute of West Asian and African Studies, Wenping. And with us here in Washington is the former U.S. Ambassador to the Congo and Nigeria, Robin Sanders. She currently heads the Feeds Advocacy Initiative, focusing on economic development and business strategies in Africa. Welcome to both of you again. Ambassador, I want to ask you about what we just heard there from President Obama and President Kenyatta, and obviously, they're sounding very upbeat about this relationship. And one of the significant things we heard from President Kenyatta was that he's not seeing this in any kind of black-white situation, in any kind of, you're either with us or against us kind of thing. Seeing it across the board, this is good for Africa.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is good for Africa. It's definitely good for the U.S.-Africa relationship. I think that Kenya is definitely the East African powerhouse in terms of economy. It drives the sub-region. It's critically important. There has been a bit of a reset, because Kenyatta was facing ICC charges. So at least at the government-to-government level or the presidential-to-presidential level, you did have to have a reset in order for the president to be able to go there. And so now that the ICC has dropped its charges against President Kenyatta, it allows for our president to make a visit there. But even with that, the economic dynamics hadn't changed, even though you had this little bit of a strain at the top given the ICC charges.
Wenping, we just heard the ambassador talk about the security role that the United States plays on the African continent. Let's look at China's role. And Beijing is beginning to take a leading role right now in ensuring security in sub-Saharan Africa. It's helping the African Union establish a rapid response military force to keep the peace. So how does China see its role in making sure that there is peace on the continent?
Well, I think in recent years, China has strengthened its cooperation with Africa in security field. For example, apart from those multilateral cooperation through the UN channel, the people knows that China now, in terms of those number of peacekeepers providing, I think China now ranks as the #1 among those P5, those permanent members in the Security Council of United Nations. So apart from that way, and China also has strengthened bilateral cooperation with AU and with other African countries. For example, we have provided material, equipment assistance, and also cash assistance to AU to support the different missions, either in the Somalia or in Sudan or South Sudan. And also we have put a lot of resources for training African peacekeeper, bring them to China, or send our security cooperation advisor, with some African countries. So with those, I think effort has been made. Now China, I think African security now matters very much, even with China's investment safety and with safety of Chinese personnel in Africa.
I think for us, though, the difference there, and there is a big one, is that you have groups like Al-Shabaab that have really targeted the U.S. And I think that makes the security relationship that we have a little bit different than just security cooperation. It really is a threat to our homeland. We've actually seen, evidence and incidences here where that has actually happened here in terms of not only recruiting for Al-Shabaab in places like Minnesota and North Carolina, et cetera, but we've also had incidences here where they've had connections not only through Al-Shabaab, but with ISIL as well. So we actually not only have cooperation, which is always good to do, but we actually have a terrorism component to our relationship with Africa, particularly in the Sahel.
Yeah, you know, and I also want to ask you about the nature of the relationship when we, you know, the two different relationships, China and the US with Africa. You've written about the fact that, you know, there are huge numbers of Chinese who now live in Africa, who've made it their home. They work there as businessmen or businesswomen, sellers in African markets. I mean, we don't see many, you know, those kinds of numbers when it comes to Americans living in Africa, do we?
You're absolutely right. I just came back from Congo and Central African Republic, and you know, to follow up on an earlier point, the massive infrastructure projects that I see China doing on the continent, we are not doing. Even though we have the Millennium Challenge account that does help with infrastructure development, we're not there in the numbers that China is. And again, it's not a zero-sum game. I think it's still up to the Africans to decide who they want to work with in different sectors. But that being said, I think the people-to-people exchange, to the degree that I've seen of the Chinese people-to-people relationship, where you have long-term residents, you have families, you have, you know, African and Chinese families intermingling together and building a relationship and building a life together. We don't see that as much from Americans, but I assume that over time that will change as more and more Americans don't see Africa as one-dimensional and come to see Africa as the multifaceted, multi-dynamic continent that it is. I think we'll see that over time.
Okay. Wenping, one final point, and I was wondering how you see it and how China sees the relationship that the ambassador was talking about. And I'd be grateful if you could keep it brief. We're running out of time, because you put it rather well in one of the pieces that you wrote. You said that this is a natural combination of African needs and Chinese will and capability.
Well, I think, when we compare about U.S. engagement with Africa and China's engagement with Africa, both sides have their advantages and also some disadvantages. So for me, I think Africa now is open their arm. They have different, the rooms in their house. So it's okay for embracing all of those foreign investors and also those foreign partners. And both China and the United States, we have very strong in the economic side,
yes.
Like trade. Now China becoming the #1 trade partner. But the U.S. is very good about security cooperation and anti-terror, those strategy and sharing those information, intelligence. So that is very good for African security.
That's where we have to leave it. Thanks to both of you for joining us. We are going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we'll get the view from Ethiopia. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.